What's happening, my fellow ghouls and ghoulettes? Welcome to a brand new episode of Chris's Custom Collectibles. Storytime. This is Christopher Nelson, award-winning special effects makeup artist who's racked up a couple of fancy statues over the years for his work on such productions as Suicide Squad 2016 and American Horror Story. I've actually had the pleasure of meeting Chris at Monsterpalooza 2017. Absolute top bloke. He's also a pretty good actor. One of his roles that stands out most to me is the character of Tommy in Kill Bill Volume 2, sharing the screen with Uma Thurman and David Carradine. So badass. He also went on to work on 3 small independent unknown films known as Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. Chris, along with Vincent Van Dyke and the effects crew, were tasked with creating the effects gags in all 3 films. But not only that, they're also tasked with creating the iconic Michael Myers mask for all 3 films. Now, Chris also had a neat little cameo in Halloween 2018 as Officer Francis. He was acting alongside Charlie Benton as Officer Richards, who also acted as a consultant on the film. Now, along with his cameo, Chris's Officer Francis had a pretty gruesome death scene at the hands of Michael Myers, turning his head into a jack-o'-lantern. And with the release of the Halloween 2018 merchandise, there was a release of a quarter-scale Michael Myers figure from NECA, accompanied with a severed Officer Francis head. That one right there. And today, we're gonna pimp Mr. Nelson's head out. That sounds very wrong. But yeah, ghouls and ghoulettes, this is just gonna be a fun little quickie custom collectible. Now, like I said, the original Officer Francis head came with this quarter-scale Michael Myers figure that I pimped out last year in honor of Halloween Kills coming out. And I didn't get around to customizing the Officer Francis head, because by the time I was done with him, I looked at the Officer Francis head and thought, oh man, I've got to do the hair on that again. And I figured I'd save it for a rainy day as a quick little custom collectible. So here we are, here is the head in all its glory before we've done any work to it. Now, it is a beautiful sculpt and a beautiful representation of Mr. Nelson's gorgeous melon. So the first step is we've got to take this baby apart. So with that being said, let's get to it. Ooh, it is time for some shitty commentary. Now, as you can see there is a seam line going down either side of Mr. Nelson's head. So this is a 2-piecer. So we just got to very carefully, as you can see right there, I mean very careful and very, very responsible, get a Stanley knife and start to splice and slit where that mold seam is. We want to separate this head and get to work carving away the hair. So it's hard to explain. It kind of has like an outer shell and an inner shell, like an outer skin. There's a couple of pieces to this this head, and I also like the fact that the inside is detailed. It's all gutsy and stuff like that. So I just quickly put it back together and traced where the hairline is, just to give me a rough outline of where the hairline's going to be, and kind of followed it up on the top there of the hairline, because that's kind of pivotal with Chris's hair. Kind of has this nice little swoop, and you'll see me style it at the end. But again, I'm just grabbing that Stanley knife and chipping away at all the excess hair, trying to flatten it as much as possible. You can also use a Dremel, a Ryobi rotary tool and stuff like that. I do attack it with some sandpaper as well, but just very carefully here and there, just going about it with a Stanley knife. And I'm pretty happy with that overall. And keep in mind that it's going to be covered with hair. So I'm just going to go and glue the pieces back together. Again, this was just a temporary thing just to get the hair off and also trace the hairline. But just using some cheap and nasty super glue, we're just going to piece it back together nice and easy. And this plastic was very easy to work with. The glue seemed to adhere to it pretty well. So I'm just going to get a 120 grit sandpaper and sand that seam line. We could use a bog filler, but because the bog filler isn't the same product and material as what this injection plastic is, it just wouldn't work. It may crack off if it did flex at all. So I'm just going to get actually a 40 grit sandpaper this time and really smooth down the dome of the head, and that really is just gets rid of all those chunky parts. So I've got some isopropyl alcohol in an aerosol can. This stuff is amazing. It's $10 from Jaycar, the electronics shop, and I'm just brushing it all over the head just to clear out any dust or whatnot for when we go to airbrush on our first layer of paint. So I'm actually getting some blue tack and just blue tacking the hairline just so I've got like a proper stencil line. Now I'm using the RAL 9001 Cream Wise from MIG. This is an airbrush acrylic. This stuff is amazing. I've only just started using it. Just loading it into my airbrush, no mixing, no thinning down, all good to go, and just doing a light mist over the entire head and just rotating it as I go. I'm doing this out on my balcony just so the excess kind of goes away into the ether. Now, like I said, you're probably going to think this is just this doesn't look like a flesh color. So the next step after this, and this stuff dries pretty quick, it is an acrylic, and it did really stick well to this mold injection plastic, so I was pretty happy with that. The next step is we're actually going to thin down this flesh colored acrylic here. So just mix a tiny bit of water, but we only need a little dab of the actual paint, and then just a couple of drops of water, thin it down. Because when I see Chris's skin, he's very fair skinned, but it's also got like remnants of like blotchiness and stuff like that, especially looking at the silicone prop head that they created for the film. And this is just a matter of kind of just stippling it all over the entire head until I reach that happy medium. But as you can see, the skin color complements the white color. They work together just to give that fair skin look. And you don't want to go too heavy, otherwise the head will look way too tan. It's just finding that happy medium. And when it was all said and done and dried, I was pretty happy with that, especially with that white, that base white kind of bleeding through. So I just got some more of that white that we use as the base coat and doing his eyebrows, even though you're not really going to see them because they're going to be covered with gore and schmutz, but it just helps to have them there, ghouls and ghoulettes. I'm just going to peel off that blue tack now, and we can see our beautiful hairline and where we're going to be laying down our hair. Now I'm just going to grab a hot pink pearl. Again, this is like the eyebrows. You're probably not even going to notice it, but it just helps to have it there, just have it present. So this is for around all the wounds where there'd be like inflammation and stuff like that. And looking at the silicone prop head, the photo of Chris holding it, there is like a sort of a pinkish reddish going on around all the wounds. Again, all inflammation and stuff like that, and just going into all the carved areas where like the knife has sort of like split and slithered parts of the eyes and the mouth and stuff like that. And it just kind of helps with realism, and also do the base layer of the tongue, even though the tongue's going to be covered in fake blood. So again, I'm going to be using the anodized red from Dupli-Color. This is actually a car paint, but it is the best for fake blood, and I completely stumbled upon this on a whim, and it's just the best thing ever for like resin props and stuff like that. So I'm going to be applying the base layer for all the areas where there's exposed wounds, muscle and stuff like that around the mouth. I'm going to leave the teeth bare for now, but this is pretty much just going in for the base paint work. And then when it comes to like the splatter and stuff, you'll see that I do use a brush for that. But as you can see there, I'm kind of like pushing and forcing the brush into the sharper, jagged points, and it just fills it in perfectly. As you can see there, it's all starting to come together, especially when you're filling in all those beautiful wound areas. Like, this is a beautiful sculpt, like I said at the beginning of this video. It's a great representation of the actual screen used prop, which I just absolutely love, and it's a brilliant death scene in the film. And now I'm starting to do like the blood weeping and stuff like that, and that I kind of dug that look on the left eye. It looks like a throwback to the Halloween 2 Blood Tears look. So I'm getting a disposable brush and dabbing the red on, like as if it's sprayed blood, and there's just like bits and pieces flying everywhere. That's the best way to do it. You can flick the bristles of the brush, but because it's such a small piece, I feel like it would cover the entire piece, whereas that, you can control it. Now we're going to use some crepe wool for the hair. This is white crepe wool. I love using this stuff. Now there is a bit of prep involved because it does arrive plaited, and you have to get a hair straightener and straighten the crepe wool out. I call it crepe hair because we're using it as hair. Crepe wool, crepe hair, but it is a natural fiber, so you are able to use a hair straightener and it will not melt. And the prep isn't that bad, but obviously you want to get it as straight as possible. If you don't do it enough, it still will have that wave to it. But the glue we're going to be using is E6000. I've heard a lot of Myers mask rehaulers use this for hairing their masks, and I wanted to give it a crack. So make sure you use the crystal clear one. And I've gone ahead with a lead pencil and just drawn the rows where I'm going to be laying down the hair. Now this is a rough guide because sometimes it won't exactly line up, but I've just got a cut off piece of silicone that we're going to be using essentially as our brush to smush in the glued parts of the hair, because nothing wants to stick to silicone but silicone. If you use a brush, it can get very messy. So I'm just going to start cutting up my sections of hair and spreading them out with my fingers. So I do lay down a first layer of glue on the actual head sculpt. And then what I'll do is I'll either lay the hair down and then smush the glue in, or before that, I'll pre-soak the glue into the hairline, the edge of the hair, and then lay it down. Either way works fine. But this is the first method here, just layering it down and then getting some excess glue that's on the silicone slabs there and essentially using that bit of silicone as a brush. And this stuff takes like 4 minutes to dry. I know I'm being very precise saying 4 minutes, but it's true. And just working your way up with the rows, take your time with it and let each row dry. The last thing you want is the previous row not drying and you put on the next row and then that hair glues down to the row behind it and then it just gets really messy. So as I get closer to the hairline, I'm really taking my time and I've got those pre-glued rows of hair ready to go. And eventually when we get to the hairline, the sides are pretty straightforward because I just glued them backwards. As you can see right there, I'm just pre-gluing for the hairline and then carefully placing it backwards. But when it came to the actual top hairline, I leave it angled up, as you'll see in a minute. And that is because of the hairstyle that Chris sports in the 2018 Halloween film. He kind of has that nice little wave going on top of his hair. But this was very satisfying and it does help when you pre-soak the glue into the edges of the hair. And just also using it as like a stippling sponge, that piece of silicone. But as you can see right here with the top hairline, I glue it down as carefully as I can and then leave it angled up to dry. The last thing you want is it completely glued back and that just makes styling the hair even harder, trust me. But you've got to be very careful with this and like very carefully stipple it on as you see like that and just leave it hanging up like that. Now as you can see, Mr. Nelson's looking a bit like Doc Brown at the moment, so we got to comb out the excess hair. You really got to thin this down, otherwise it's just going to be way too puffy. And that's what you usually do with like Myers mask hair and stuff like that. Any mask that has hair, you got to thin it out, otherwise it's just way too much. So I'm just grabbing some fine little trimming scissors and we're going to start the process of giving him a haircut and thinning the hair out as well. I am no hairdresser. I don't know how hairdressers and barbers do it. It's an art form in itself, but just very carefully going up the side of the ear there so we have his sideburns. And now just thinning out the back of the hair because we've still got that Doc Brown-esque hair looking kind of that vibe. But once we put our hairspray onto it, I'm also separating the hair there because there is a part there with Chris's hair in the film. Now I've just got some VO5 extra hold spray and this is what I'm using to essentially lacquer down the hair and just like starch it and just really buckle it down. So you really got to keep working with it. You probably have to do a good couple of passes because it is such a small scale. It just wants to stick up, especially when it came to his little wave there. Really soak in that VO5 and just keep combing it, using your hands. As you see in a minute, I use my hand just to like smooth it over and over and over and just kind of keep doing that motion there a couple of times. Just that sweeping motion, build it up. Now I did get some more of that anodized red on a brush and then just apply it into the hairline so it's more blood spray. And the final touch, and I was very happy I found this, was the perfect scale, was a $5 little LED torch from my local grocery store. And now we're good for the final reveal. There we have it, guys. The Officer Francis quarter scale head is done and dusted. This was a fun little custom collectible, and I felt I owed it to you guys to do this one after the custom collectible of the full quarter scale Michael Myers figure from last year. And also, this is just a tribute to Mr. Christopher Nelson, who is just doing incredible work in Hollywood at the moment. He's just finished The Exorcist that David Gordon Green is doing at the moment, so I can't wait to see what he does with that. But again, just thank you, sir. You do incredible work, and it's so cool to see you have this neat cameo in Halloween 2018. With that being said, wherever you are in the world, please have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly, and until next time, ghouls and ghoulettes, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.